So I'll be using a lot of the material by a man called Michael Heiser. He's a doctor of biblical languages, ancient Near East. He's a historian. He's written a lot on this subject. The Bible has a lot of things in it that people like Dr. Heiser and others believes the church has sort of lost or covered over for the last 2 millennia almost, because they involve a lot of supernatural things, almost fantastical, mythological things. Are we okay?
Disclaimer?
Yeah, thank you. So a disclaimer once again, anyone visiting, if you're happening to watch this on YouTube, we'll upload it later on youtube.com/Restoration Fellowship. But I have to do disclaimers all the time because many of our fellow, we're called biblical Unitarians, have a sort of, I must say, cult-like view that we shouldn't, because we're biblical Unitarians, we're against Trinitarianism, we're against immortal soul doctrine, and various things that Orthodoxy teaches. I have to provide disclaimers because some of my fellow biblical Unitarians think that we should not even read other people, read evangelicals. But we're obviously not a cult, and there are many things I can agree with evangelicals on. For example, their position on the New Covenant versus the Old Covenant, on should Christians keep the Sabbath and so on. That I think evangelicalism as a whole has that pretty clear. They might be wrong, I might be wrong, but I can certainly agree with that. And quote some of them. MacArthur, I don't know, name your favorite, whatever, Baptist, Lutheran preacher. They're pretty good on that, I believe. So, nonetheless, I have to provide a disclaimer. I obviously do not subscribe to everything Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Burden, which I'll be citing, and others, being evangelicals, teach about, especially God and Jesus. But I think we can find some agreement, can we, on some things with people, and maybe open a conversation to other things. Okay, so there's a handout, and the handout's online. The website is there on the other browser. If you don't see it, Sarah, please. So Dr. Michael Heiser teaches that this issue of Genesis 6 and the sons of God is of utmost importance because it deals with actually what's wrong with the world. I was an agnostic not long ago, but I could see as an agnostic that there was something wrong with the world. When you watch television, you see the violence, you see people killing children in the womb. Deep inside, even to an agnostic, there's something wrong with this picture. So Dr. Heiser puts it this way: if you were to ask a Jew, if you were to travel back in time to the first apostolic age and ask a Jew what's wrong with this picture, they would cite 3 things. Genesis 3, the fall of Adam, well known. Genesis 6, the sons of God, who are watchers or watcher angels, who left their place, we'll see why, and had sex, basically, to put it bluntly and clearly, with women, and created this race that we'll look at called the giants, or Nephilim in Hebrew. So they would point to those 2 things, and they'll probably, Dr. Heiser says, throw in for good measure the incident at Babel, where people got together and tried to construct a structure that reached to the heavens because they wanted to touch the divine, quote unquote. So that's an interesting view. I'll be following that view, that those are the problems that we are in right now. Those are the problems we see ourselves in. The fall in Genesis 3, the sons of God, and Babel. I'll talk about Genesis 6, obviously, as a continuation of last Sunday, sermon, which you can see on our youtube.com/Restoration Fellowship video. And by the way, thank you for your viewership. We just passed the 1 million views of the channel in 8 years. It only took us 8 years, but it's a great milestone for me anyway, because we work on it so hard, Anthony and I. Okay, so a brief outline of what I'll be doing today. Hopefully get through this, and if you got any comments and so on, please interrupt me. So if you got any questions, yeah, just as I go, because I'll try and get through this. The simple outline is this. So we'll look at the watcher angels, the spirits in prison, as Anthony alluded to. So Genesis 6, Peter and Jude. We'll look at the giants in the land. So the giants are another name for the Nephilim, also called the fallen ones in Genesis 6. I'll be trying to map their course in the land, and also the fate of the giants, a giant extermination that happened. Mostly I've been focusing the last week or so, and in a broader sense the last couple of months, on demonology, the doctrine of demons. I know, right? Yeah, go home and study up on demons all day. Yay! So some of this material I will apologize for now, because it might offend some people, but I think it's important in order to get the context of what we're dealing with in the demonic world. So I'm going to look at terminology, possible origins for demons, and the early evidence for. And then the takeaway, as usual. So what, right? Why is this biblical demonology important to me? Well, I believe, as the Bible believes, that it has to do with doctrines of demons. I think that's a phrase in Timothy, Paul uses. So Genesis 6, just a brief sort of excursus to flesh out some of the things I was talking about last week. So basically there are 3 views, or 4 views I got on the screen there. So there are 4 views about Genesis 6. What is it about? Is it about fallen angels who somehow came down from heaven, took on flesh, obviously, and had sex with women? That's the view I'll be proposing. Sounds fantastical, I know. But there are other views, like what I called last Sunday the humans view. The fact that actually sons of God is another phrase used for the sons of Seth, who was the son of Adam, if I got my early chronology. Or that they were somehow fallen kings or fallen tyrants, human beings that were somehow influenced by Satan, in a way. Now, I think most of evangelicalism, well, no, should I say most, Anthony, would agree with the first view, that there is a supernatural, that sons of God, because of the terminology, we'll look at it briefly. Yes, the first view is probably correct. They were a type of angel, a class of angel, that decided to do this great sin. And that was really, as Albright says in a book called From the Stone Age to Christianity, that's really the predominant view. Before Christ, during Christ, and after Christ. That we lost around the time of your favorite Augustine, friend Augustine, who... So that was really the majority view. So there was this phrase we looked at last Sunday, spirits in prison. So Peter and Jude talk about these fallen angels, watcher angels, who God put in a prison called Tartarus, and they're down there to this day, awaiting in gloomy darkness the great day of judgment. So it's a punishment, right? They're down there. God could have destroyed them. God can do anything. Angels are not eternal. They're created beings like us. No one has eternality by nature, only God. The only immortal king, etc. in Timothy. If you look at the phrase, or more specifically at the word spirits, as Anthony has alluded to in the plural, pneumata, it's usually, predominantly, generally used for angels. So, for example, I'll just go briefly, in the Gospels, you'll see that
angels or demons.
Or demons.
Right. Angels or demons. Thank you. Yes. Angels and demons. By the way, thanks, because, so you got angels, holy angels, and there are different types of angels, right? We see it in Revelation. You got elders, if you believe that's angels, the elders are on the throne. And then you got, for example, angels like in Ezekiel, the great vision of Ezekiel with faces, a lion and this and that. So there are different cherubs. Sometimes we get names for them. Sometimes they're specifically called because they're special, like archangels, Michael, and so. So within the angelic world, there are many types of angels. And within the fallen angel world, the demonic world, there are also, we will find different types of demons. But this word spirits, pneumata, in the gospel predominantly, generally means angelic beings. Okay, so we have good ones and bad ones. So throughout the gospels, Jesus, as we know, is driving out spirits. He's driving out unclean spirits. Unclean, by the way, it's another way of saying evil. The spirits are subject to Jesus, right? Then in Hebrews 1, for example, God makes his angel spirits, pneumata, like wind or winds. You have deceiving spirits with demonic doctrines. That's the 1 Timothy 4:1. You have the seven spirits, again plural, right? Every time the word appears, even in the singular, whenever you get absolutely just spirit without qualification, as in spirit of Anthony, it usually means an angelic being, good or bad, depending on the context. You got the spirits of demons in Revelation 16. Remember, there's a vision, terrible vision of a creature, I forgot, is it the dragon and three spirits? The evil trinity? Anyway, it's a joke. Come out of this thing like frogs or something. As most things in life, if not in the Bible, there are exceptions to this rule, I found. So there are three places that Anthony and I think Anthony agreed, that they're used absolutely, spirits, but it's in reference to probably human beings. Hebrews 12:9 talks about God being the father of spirits. 1 John 4:1, test the spirits, probably having to do with us. We have to test each other, by the way. And 1 Corinthians 12:10, where one of the gifts is to discern spirits, probably to do with human beings. I don't know how you can discern angelic spirits, but so there are exceptions to the rule, but predominantly, and if you're online, you can see the list there. I will not burden those here with the huge list, but there are, I believe the count was 60, was it 60? Anyway, tens of dozens of times. We looked also, so Peter talks about this, right? Spirits, so they're probably not human. Most likely, 99.9%, I'm probably sure. There's no certainties in life, but I'm pretty sure they're not human. Nonetheless, we have the Catholic Church Catechism, Article 5, says that Jesus descended into hell. We'll talk about that, by the way. These things are in a place called Tartarus, not in hell, not in Hades. Not in Hades. They're in a compartment, maybe we could say, of Hades. But they're not in hell proper. So the Catechism says he went down to hell, Jesus. On the third day, he rose again. Just briefly, the reason I don't believe that is because the account in Peter, and if we couple it with Jude, says that Christ went down to Kerizu. Kerizu is the Greek, which means to proclaim something. The belief is that Jesus went down there to preach to sort of evangelize dead human beings who are in hell, no less, so they're wicked, and somehow to preach to them, I guess, in order to convert some of them. Now that is, first of all, the wicked are never redeemed, by the way. There's no place in Scripture where it says that the wicked dead, right, have a second chance at immortality. There's no text that exists. If such a text existed, it would undermine our whole faith. Think about it. If there's a chance for a Hitler-like, we always mention Hitler, but he's the Antichrist of our times, right? He's the go-to figure. But someone as bad as Hitler would somehow find redemption. I think it would destroy my faith. I don't know about yours, but then what's the point, right? By the way, this is what Mormons believe. Just to throw in a system out there. They actually have a system, the Mormons, where, yes, the Hitlers can be redeemed in the afterlife. Obviously, Mormons, like Orthodoxy, shares the belief that we don't die when we die. We're disembodied whatevers. But actually, that's a Mormon view. Now, I'm not attacking Mormon. I'm just stating a fact of Mormon doctrine there. So, that's one thing. It would undermine not only the whole of our faith, it undermines the whole letter of Peter. For example, in 1 Peter 2 and chapters 2 and 4, I'll just paraphrase what he says. For those who do not believe, Christ has become a stone or a rock that will crush them because they disobeyed the word. That is the word of the kingdom, the word of the gospel, as they were destined to do. It's done. It's dusted. Literally, they're dusted. It's destined. For if it's hard for even a good person to be saved, says Peter, what chance will the wicked have? So think about that. If Jesus went down there to preach, to somehow evangelize dead people, dead wicked people, okay.
And if he did it while he was dead.
Well, I'll get to that.
To the dead. We have a number of problems.
We'll get to that. Yes, Jesus is dead, they're dead, somehow they're not dead. Okay, so I talked about this place called Tartarus. It's called a prison. Prison is never Hades. No one goes to prison when you're dead. You go to Sheol. In the Hebrew Bible, it's called Sheol, which is basically grave dome, or the place of the grave. It's never described, as far as I know, someone might correct me, as a prison. It's the earth, it's underground, it's done, it's dusted. Interestingly enough, only angels right now, if we believe there are angels down there, are in prison, or later Satan will be put in prison. For example, Revelation 18, chapter 18 and 20 says that one day he will be tied up and thrown in prison. Again, Tartarus is not Hades, it's not hell. By the way, that's not a proper translation of Hades. Hades is just the grave. There's no such thing as hell. Hell is a Catholic concoction. Concoction is the word that has obviously been taken by Protestants, unfortunately. Tartarus is not Hades, hell. It's not Gehenna, the lake of fire. That's not Tartarus. It's in the grave, in Hades. It's not Hades. Like I said, you sort of look at it as a compartment of Hades or the grave. In the New Testament, this is similar to the abyss. There's a reference to the abyss in Luke 8:31, and we'll read some of the demonology going on. But for example, it's when Jesus is encountering one of the demons, and the demons, remember, says, "Are you here to judge us before our time? Don't throw us in the abyss." Luke 8:31. The abyss pops up in Revelation 9. I was talking about this. JWs, to throw out another system, not to attack, but just to state as a fact, the JWs, for example, believe that Jesus, among other things, is also the angel of destruction of Revelation 9. Did you know that? He's Abaddon. He's Apollyon. the angel, a wicked angel in Revelation. Now, J.W. Doctrine currently teaches that, not to attack them, but just to make you aware of that. This demon comes out of the abyss, says Revelation 9. Now, was Jesus dead when he went down there? No. 1 Peter 3:18 says he was made alive. To be made alive means you're not dead, Kate. To be made alive means, it's like when I wake up, it means I'm not sleeping. Okay? He was made alive in the Spirit, by the power of God's Spirit, which parallels, by the way, 1 Peter 3:21, the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. The word biblical commentary, can you read it there on your notes, please, Barbara? I think it's the second one on page 1.
There's growing agreement that the distinction here indicated by flesh and spirit is not between the material and immaterial parts of Christ's person, i.e. his body and soul, but rather between his earthly existence and his risen state, i.e. bodily, as resurrection always is in the New Testament.
Now that's interesting. There's a growing consensus. Isn't that interesting? So the people who Anthony always talks about, look, if you devote your life almost 24/7, if you're lucky enough as a biblical Unitarian, because no one can and will employ us as teachers of Bible. I wish I was teaching Bible, but unfortunately I have to go and do other stuff. But people who devote themselves to language, who are lucky enough to find a profession in it, biblical studies, theology, are coming to this blatant conclusions. Just briefly, I want to mention 1 Timothy 3:16. I would ask you to read 1 Timothy 3:16, along with 1 Peter 3, specifically 18. Listen to this. So this is Timothy. Although I hope to come to you soon, says Paul to Timothy, I'm writing you these instructions so that if I'm delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household. 1 Timothy 3:15, which is the church of the living God, the pillar of foundation, etc. 16, beyond all question, the secret, should be really secret, mysterion, I prefer secret. It's not a mystery we'll never know, but a secret is revealed, from which true godliness springs, is great. So this is a great secret. He, that is Jesus, appeared, manifested, came to us as a human being, not maybe manifested is not good. He was here as a flesh and human being. He was made right by the Spirit, or through the Spirit, was seen by angels. That's interesting. Was preached among the nations by us as resurrected. Was believed on in the world. Well, some believe that the whole world. Was taken up in glory. Read that with 1 Peter 3:16-18, and you'll see that basically Peter and Paul are talking about the same event. Why? Well, he was made alive by the Spirit, vindicated, says Paul. He was seen by angels. Who? What angels? Well, maybe down there. Maybe that's an illusion. Paul knows this story very well, by the way. He was preached, yes, among that he was believed by some in the world, and taken up. See the trajectory? Christ is dead. He comes back to life. He goes down to this compartment of Hades, not hell. He proclaims, announces to the devils there, the demons. Where is it? I'm trying to find. He announces his victory, basically. I won. For example, I won despite your worst efforts to stop or corrupt my bloodline. I won. It's a sort of in your face, as we say nowadays. So it's the same story. It's a very interesting parallel there with Peter and Paul are making the same point. Okay, so that's just briefly. I wanted to flesh some of that out a bit more. So we'll go to the one of the second points I have here: the giant exterminations in the land. So, Bob, if you can please go to Numbers 13. Anthony, if you can please go to Joshua 12. Barbara, if you could please go to 2 Samuel 5. And Michelle, if you could please go to 1 Chronicles 20. So we'll look at the giant exterminations, plural, in the land. Now, why the land? Why did these things, these supernatural beings, the children of the watcher angels, why did they go to the land? They could have gone, Sarah, my wife, said, why didn't they go to China? They could have gone to the Americas. They could go anywhere. No, they sort of, you'll see, well, the viewers will see a map that I was sent. But basically, if you know the geography of Jerusalem, they're there. They're in ancient Palestine, what's called ancient Palestine. They're pretty grouped together there. So why the land? Well, Genesis 3:15 makes sense, right? Satan knew Scripture. He knew his Scripture. Jesus encountered Satan in the desert, remember? And he's quoting Scripture, Satan. You know, so they know the deal. They know what's going on. They know the prophecy. The seed of the woman will crush the serpent. They know what's going on. So one of the views, Bullinger's belief, I call it, Bullinger's belief, he was a dispensationalist. I'm not a dispensationalist, but Bullinger, I think, got it right, that this was, the Genesis 6 event was done in order to disrupt the prophecy of the seed, the coming of the Messiah. They wanted to corrupt that line. But it got worse. It ended up almost corrupting all of us. So why the land? Well, because that was the strategy. That was Bullinger's belief. So was it Paul? Mm-hmm. Numbers 13, please, verses 25. If you can start in Numbers 13, and then the others, I'll get you to read yours, please.
When they returned from spying out the land, at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wildernesses of the land and at Kadesh, and they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and Hittites and the Jebusites and Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against this people, for they're too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone and spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, or parts of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in the sight.
All right, thanks, Bob. So, by the way, the Greek translation of those Hebrew scriptures for Nephilim, they have gigantes, or is it gigantes?
Gigantes.
Gigantes. Gigantes. So, transliterated, it means giants. Transliterated, it means giants. But apparently, I wanted to ask this resident Greek and Hebrew scholar here, but correct me, but I read a commentary that said that a literal translation is earthbound. Gigantes. Gigantes?
Gigantes is simply giants.
Not earthbound?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
It's possible, yeah, I have to think about that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Giants is the translation.
Giants is the translation.
Gigantes, yeah.
But literally, apparently, it also connotes earthbound,
Maybe.
which would make sense because why would the account of Genesis 6 say that if they were human beings, why would they be we're all earthbound? But anyway, I wanted to run that by you. Joshua 12, please. Whoever has Joshua 12.
I do.
Go down to verse 8, please, Anthony. Verse 1 to 8. Thank you.
12:1. These are the kings of the land whom the sons of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from the valley of Ammon as far as Mount Hermon, and all the Arabah to the east. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, both the middle of the valley and half of Gilead, even as far as the brook Jabbok, the border of the sons of Ammon, and the Arabah as far as the sea of Kinneroth towards the east, and as far as the sea of Arabah, even the Salt Sea, eastward towards Beth Jesimoth, and on the south at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah, and the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salekah and all Bashan, as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites, and half of Gilead as far as the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Verse 6, Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the sons of Israel defeated them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh as a possession. Verse 7, Now these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the sons of Israel defeated.
Oh, that's good, Anthony. We'll stop there.
Okay?
The focus there is on Mount Hermon, and this king Og, not original gangster, but Og. These are prominent things, the Mount Hermon, and people, Og. Dr. Michael Heiser's, one of his books is called Reversing Hermon, or Hermon, Hermon. Why? Because in the Enoch canon, in the Enoch literature that we'll go to, where we really get this fleshed out in detail. There's 60 chapters of this book, this first Enoch. Mount Hermon is famous because that's where these angels, watcher angels, who become fallen angels, bad angels, descended upon. Mount Hermon is like a chain of mountains presently near the border to Lebanon. So it's north of Israel on the border. And it's it's replete with mysticism. Ancient Near East has a lot of stories about this mountainous region. And one of them is this, that the Bible puts it in a historical context that these watcher angels came down, and that's where they get together, that's where they hatched their plan to do what they did. Og is a very key figure, especially in Jewish mystical writings, as they're called. Not Enoch as such, but in other writings which are mystical Jewish things, like the Kabbalah. Is it Kabbalah, the mysticism, Jewish mysticism? Og is a very important figure because in one of the stories of this Jewish mysticism is that he pleaded with Noah to save him from the flood. And he repented and he said, anyway, Noah believed this guy, this giant. He said, okay, just go on the roof of the ark. And this thing survived the flood, but then later recanted it and went back to his wicked ways. So he is the new father, let's call it, of these giants. That's why Genesis 6 says there were giants back then and then afterwards. So some Jews made up this story. I say made up because there's no biblical. But nonetheless, he's in the Bible, Og. And look where he's ruling. He's ruling over Mount Hermon. Why is he ruling over Mount Hermon? Well, maybe it has a connection to
Don't you
that.
think if that happened, it would be written in the Bible? That, you know, there's many places, even in the New Testament, that says only 8 people.
Right,
8
not.
people made it through.
Well, he's not really a people. He's a supernatural figure. So.
Could I ask a
And
question?
one guy riding on the hood.
I'm a little bit ignorant here, but
Yes, Paul.
okay. You keep using this word "watcher angels." I'm not familiar with that term. How do you define that?
Oh, sorry. Last Sunday, we looked at so the book of Enoch. We'll go to the book of Enoch. Enoch calls the sons of God watchers. Watchers also appears in the book of Daniel for a name for a type of angel. So it's just another name for a type of angel who we believe are the sons of God of Genesis 6. Some turn bad, but obviously in the book of Daniel they're portrayed as these watchers are good angels. So that was last. Sorry, I made this point. 2 Samuel 5, please, starting in verse 17. Whoever I gave that scripture to, please.
17.
Oh, sorry. Before you move on, by the way, so that was Joshua 12. Anthony read. In the following chapter, there's more information. For example, in verse 12, the whole kingdom of Og in Basham, who reigned in so-and-so, he was the last of the Rephites. Rephites, it's another name, Rephaim or Rephites, for these children, the Nephilim. Their descendants, right. We'll talk more about that, Paul. And then, furthermore, it says, Joshua 13:12, Moses had defeated them and taken over their land. Now it says he was the last, but really he wasn't the last. And we'll see why. Okay, the Samuel one, please. 17 to 25.
When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king of Israel, they mobilized all their forces to capture him. But David was told they were coming and went into the stronghold. The Philistines arrived and spread out across the valley of Rephaim. So David asked the Lord, "Should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord replied, "Yes, go ahead. I will certainly give you the victory." So David went to Baal Perazim and defeated the Philistines there. "The Lord has done it," David exclaimed. "He burst through my enemies like a raging flood." So David named that place Baal Perazim, which means the Lord who burst through. The Philistines had abandoned their idols there, so David and his troops confiscated them. But after a while the Philistines returned and again spread out across the valley of Rephaim. And once again David asked the Lord what to do. "Do not attack them straight on," the Lord replied. "Instead, circle around behind them and attack them near the balsam tree. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the balsam trees, attack. That will be the sign that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistines." So David did what the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer.
Michelle, the next one I gave you, please. 1 Chronicles 20, the first 8 verses, please. 1 Chronicles 20.
I was there and then verse 18 or something?
1 Chronicles 20, the first 8.
First
The
eight.
first 8 verses.
Then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that Joab led out the army and ravaged the land of the sons of Ammon, and came and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem, and Joab struck Rabbah and overthrew it. David took the crown of their king from his head, and he found it to weigh a talent of gold, and there was precious stone in it, and it was placed on David's head. And he brought out the spoil of the city, a very great amount. he brought out the people who were in it and cut them with saws and with sharp instruments and with axes. And thus David did to all the cities of the sons of Ammon. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. Now it came about after this that war broke out in Gezer with the Philistines. Then Sibachal the Hushathite killed Sippel, one of the descendants of the giants, and they were subdued. And there was war with the Philistines again, and Elhanan the son of Jair killed Lami, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Again there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 24 fingers and toes, 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. And he also was descended from the giants. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan the son of Shimeah, David's brother, killed him. These were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants.
So the point here, folks, is that these things are like cockroaches. You think you got them, and then they spring up somewhere else.
Really big roaches.
Yeah, humongous, and with 6 fingers. It's so fantastical, right? Anyone else would say objectively, this is all part of this ancient Near Mid Greco-Roman stories of Titans and Battle of the Titans and so on. But no, this is the Bible, and most of us believe it's true. By the way, verse 5 there, the brother of Goliath. There's some debate, as usual, with some things in the Bible, whether this was... No, but right there it says the brother of Goliath. So there was another Goliath-type person, actually called, in 2 Samuel 21, the parallel to this, it's also called Goliath. So, but I think it's just simply a brother of this Goliath. So the point there is that so you got God himself in Deuteronomy 2. We looked at Deuteronomy 2, chapter 2 and chapter 3, if you want to go back in your notes. So you got David, you got everyone's trying to get rid of these things and exterminate them. So that falls into the Bullinger belief, as I call it, that the reason babies and genocide, how can God, the loving God, build? Because these things are really not human. They're really subhuman. If there is such a thing as a subhuman, that's what these things were. They are not really human, and we'll further see how they're not human, not only by their look, but by their nature. We'll get into demonology and how this ties into that. So these things are all over the place. A couple of maps there. From the north, like I said, modern-day Lebanon. If you know your geography there, in the middle, in the strip land, the land there, all the way down to Jerusalem, surrounding Jerusalem. And the interesting thing is the Valley of Hinnom. One of the pictures there for our online people are the map of Bill Schlegel, our resident Bible Atlas man. And so it's interesting that we read the Valley of Rephaim, or the Valley of the Giants, Gigantes, giants, yep, is adjacent. It's really next to the Valley of Hinnom. Now, you know why the Valley of Hinnom is famous. Can someone tell me why the Valley of Hinnom?
Gehenna.
Gehenna, what's Gehenna? Just...
The lake of fire.
Right.
It's the sacrifice of children, too.
Right. So this valley, in the book of Joshua, I believe, Bob, you can correct me, they were conducting pagan nations sacrifices of children, and they had a burning, this valley was used as a sort of burning pyre or whatever. One thing a resident Bible Atlas scholar said to me, if you're going to use my maps, please mention this. Hinnom, the Gehenna, Bill says it's a medieval story, it's a made-up story that during the time of the apostles, during the time of Jesus, they were still using this as a perpetual burning sort of dumping place. He says that's not true. You probably have heard that in preachings, in sermons, that yes, that's what Jesus said, fear the one who will destroy you because you don't want to be thrown into the Gehenna. And you probably have heard it, I have heard it, that, oh, well, at that time, actually, at Jesus' times, they were using it still for, but apparently that's a myth. So Bill just wanted me to communicate that to you. You can check it out. I haven't checked it out, but... So they're all over the place, these things. You got different names for them. You got Emim, so from the fallen ones, the Nephilim, the giants, the same names, you have descendants. So Emim, Horim, Rephaim, different names. Zamzumim, Anak or Anak, which is red. That's why we're reading these accounts. Arba, Og, the king Og, Goliath and his brothers. So these things are all over the place. They have multiplied in a way, and they need to be exterminated from the land. Remember, this is before Christ, so Messiah still hasn't been born. So they're very active, right? They're actively trying to, in a way, choke out the Davidic line, if you will. Overcrowded, another word. Demons in the Old Testament. So now I want to just on the home stretch here talk about the demons. Who's next in reading? Anthony, can you read that on your handout there? There's a good book I would recommend. I'll have other books at the end. Unger, Biblical Demonology on page 1. Unger.
Page 2.
I don't think it's
Oh, it's not on the notes?
It's on page 2. At
Page
the
2.
end, yeah.
Oh no, not that one. Sorry.
Not that one?
Sorry, never mind, Anthony. Unger, in the book Biblical Demonology, says that the rabbis divided demons. Remember I told you there are different classes of demons? There are different classes of non-demon angels. So good angels, bad angels, let's call them. They divided them into two classes. Spiritual beings, in other words, they are not physical. They're beings nonetheless, but they're not physical. So rabbis did believe in a type of disembodied beings. And in half spirits, I think it is German, Anthony, Halbgeziter, H-A-L-B, Geziter.
Is this on your page?
No, on my notes.
It's not on the page.
Half spirit. So what is half spirits? I want to talk about this half spirit. So let's go with the rabbis. I'm asking you to do a lot here. Let's go out of our indoctrination maybe here. Okay, so now it's clear that demons in the Old Testament have different names because they're probably different classes of demons. So you have things like Shedim, which are demons. They're also called idols or lords. You got Serim. These appear as sort of he-goats or hairy ones. You know that old image of Satan of the medieval ages of a corn, half man and hairy? That's probably actually, the Hebrew Bible does talk about a being that looked like that. You got the Elilim idols. You got God, G-A-D, God. I think one of the accounts mentioned that. Called the demon, just the demon. And the Rapha or Rephaim. Remember, that's another name for the descendants of the children of this Genesis 6 event. I want to focus on them because I believe they're these half-spirit things, part of this class of demonic beings. Rapha or Rephaim is usually translated in your Bibles as spirits of the dead or shades, like your window shades. Sometimes they're called the dead ones. Okay? Let's see. Can someone go to, whoever gets there first, please? Isaiah, 13. Isaiah 13. So these dead ones appear throughout the, throughout the Hebrew Bible. But there I have just Isaiah 14:9, just quickly. We'll go to Isaiah 13. But just quickly, Isaiah 14:9. You got Proverbs 2, chapter 2. in chapter 9 and chapter 21. And you got Job 26 verse 5, Job 26 5, which is interesting again because in the Greek translation of Job, the Rephaim are called giants or mighty men, Giborim, which is interesting. So Isaiah 13 verses 19 to 22, please.
Want me to read it?
Anyone, please?
In Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. Nor will the Arab pitch his tent there, nor will the shepherds make their flocks lie down there. But desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches also will live there, and shaggy goats will frolic there. Hyenas will howl in their fortified towers, and jackals in their luxurious palaces. Her faithful time will also soon come, and her days will not be prolonged.
Right, so there, just there, you have at least 4 types of this Shedim, Elim, and Rephaim or Rapha creatures. So these things meet, according to Isaiah, in arid, desolate places, sort of bombed out places, if you will.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting. How are you linking these? This against Babylon to what you're talking about?
Not so much Babylon, just the picture of these creatures. I'm not focusing on Babylon as such, but the creatures that are gathered there.
Okay. The creatures.
Yeah, desert creatures are there in these arid places, right? And then it gives you a list of the creatures. So these creatures are these demons.
You don't think a jackal's a jackal and a shaggy goat's a shaggy goat?
They're translated as that, but the Hebrew words are for demons. They're not actual animals.
Yeah, my verse 21 says shaggy goats.
Right.
Then it has a note, not God demons, but goat demons.
Right.
Goat demons.
So, yes, thanks for bringing that up.
Goat creatures and goat
Yeah,
demons.
they're not animals. They look like maybe those animals, but the Hebrew, like I just said to you, if you go to the Hebrew to any lexicon and you look up the words translated, for example, jackals, owls, and so on, they are those words used for demons. For example, the goats are sirim, which is a he-goat, and you got the Rapha there. So these are nocturnal creatures that are portrayed as animals, but they're really demons. So any commentary, who's that you read?
Well, it's just,
Is that MacArthur?
No,
Yeah,
no,
it's in the margin.
it says owls is howling creatures,
Mm-hmm.
hyenas, howling creatures.
Right.
So it all kind of fits with what you're saying.
Yeah. Again, if you go to any lexicon, just check it out. Yes. Actually, people might say, "Oh, there are jackals." Yeah, sure. But there's something greater going on behind the scenes here. Right?
Do you think these creatures are possessed by the demons, or they are just these demons that are being called these creatures are being called that?
I think they're actual demons. They're. I don't think it's a jackal possessed by a demon. You know.
I've never heard.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I mean.
You didn't mention the female demon.
I don't think
There was
it
one
even
female.
Yeah, Lilith.
Lilith is the only female demon mentioned there.
Yeah, now that you brought Lilith, I wasn't going to bring her up because it brings up a whole other stuff. But another demon is called Lilith. Lilith is in a way important because she's a sort of vampiric creature. She's a bloodsucker. In Jewish extra-biblical works, there's not only women, but there's male bloodsuckers. Vampire lore, by the way, has some truth to it. Myths and stories that I was talking about this with my wife. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It might not be a real literal cyclops creature with 3 eyes, you know, the cyclops from Greco-Rome, but myths have some origin to them. So yes, the vampire thing derives probably from creatures like the Lilith, who was this sort of blood-sucking creature.
Could I ask now, with regards to the New Testament, we're talking about our battle is not against flesh and blood,
Exactly.
it's against wicked spirits. I'm assuming
That's right.
this is the one we're
Right.
doing battle with.
We'll get there.
Creature.
We'll get there, yeah.
That's the point of the whole sermon, is that when Paul
That's the
innocently
takeaway.
says,
Yeah.
we're not fighting essentially
Right.
human beings.
Right.
Our battle is really against this subject,
With shaggy goats.
which is much more real to them than it is to us.
In your notes, do you have the ISBE quote? Demon, demoniac, and demonology? Should be on page 1, I hope.
Yes.
Someone could read it, please. So this is International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Any kind.
Interest in demons as such is absent. They belong to the unseen world. They're incapable of manifestation except in the disorders which they cause. There are no materializations, no grotesque narratives of appearances and disappearances, no morbid dealing with repulsive details, no license of speculation in the narratives. In contrast with this reticence is not merely the demonology of primitive people, but also that of the non-canonical Jewish books.
Yeah, so that's in relation to demons in the Old Testament. So as Michelle was saying, I don't think that passage which is read in Isaiah 13, I think that is telling us that the wicked people, the wicked Babylon, the whore, right, of Babylon, people who belong to that system will find their place with these demons in the underworld. So something like that. It's more metaphorical, I think, language in that passage, I believe, because I agree with the ISBE. In the Old Testament, you will be hard pressed to find, how would you say it, a literal account of demons, like we do. See, even in the New Testament, we'll get to the New Testament. Even in the New Testament, demons are always in I hate to use the word possession, but with hosts. Okay, we'll get to that though. But the point here is that in the Old Testament, it's more of an unseen world. We have a picture of, okay, this evil system represented by Babylon. You will be with the jackals, with the owls, all these nocturnal creatures who the rabbis, the Jews, believed were disembodied spirits, demons, and your end will be with them, something like that. I want you to note the subtle crypto-Gnostic Orthodox translation, though, as we enter into the New Testament, as Bob was alluding to, of translations that have possession. In the Gospels where it talks about demons and stuff, and it says so-and-so was possessed. It's not really possession, it's demonization that is happening. For example, there's a difference between I'm possessing a body, which means I have total ownership, and I'm influencing this person, right, to do evil, awful things or do things to themselves. We'll see those accounts, horrible accounts, that Jesus comes upon. So it's more a demonization. These people are being demonized. A lot of people are being driven out of their minds. It's not possession as such, I think that's an important distinction. Also, there's a subtle Catholic thing with exorcism. So for example, Jesus and the apostles exorcised demons. They had exorcism ritual. It's not really exorcism. Although the word literally in the Greek, Anthony, is exorcizo, but exorcizo is not really exorcism. It has nothing to do with the practice, the Catholic really practice, and it is a Catholic ritual. It's a ritual that it's not in the Bible. In other words, if you're old enough like me, The Exorcist. Do you remember the movie The Exorcist? 1973, horrible movie. A little girl is possessed, quote unquote. The Catholic priest comes in and so on. And since then, there have been many movies like that. And then they spend days. The movie is this horrible movie of this little girl getting tortured. Anyway, and they spend days with Catholic rituals trying to do an exorcism on this little girl. But the Bible, the encounters of demons, are not about a ritual. They're about simple expulsions by Jesus. Sometimes Jesus does expulsions or healings even when the person's not there. There's an account of, I think, a mother who comes in and goes, my little girl's being demonized. Help me, Lord. He goes, okay, she's good now. It's done. There's no crucifix. There's no get the water. Remember all these movies? Get the you know that thing the Catholic priests wear. I'm not kidding Catholics, but the like a scarf thing with the cross they have. Does that have a name? And then they wrap it and they put it. I mean, all that stuff is not in the Gospels. Demonization has a simple remedy. It's the word of Jesus or the apostles. Simple. There's no touch these, grab that, get the water, get the this, get the garlic, nothing. That's very important, right? Because it also touches on charismata in general, spiritual gifts. It touches on this, on the so-called tongues or speaking in another language, on healings in general. They're not meant to be, oh, let's pray for so-and-so and everyone hold hands, and the louder we get, the more we reach. It's almost like we're trying to reach heaven in order for there to be a miracle or a healing. But in the Gospels, to this day it amazes me how simple it was. So be careful of that. Demons in the New Testament. So, like I was saying, overall, all the demonic activity in the New Testament, and there's a lot of it. Why do you think there was so much demonic activity? So remember, we just read International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. In the Old Testament, it's really not there. It sort of belongs in the world of the unseen. But in the New Testament, it's in your face. Why? Even in the book of Acts. Why? Because the man they were trying to prevent to be born got born, was born, and they went crazy. The demonic world, we didn't do it. Man, let's do something else. Let's start demonizing. Let's start trying to, right? I think that's why. And it goes all the way through to the book of Acts, by the way. So you got illnesses, you got handicaps, you got people going blind, going mute. You even got, quote, normal synagoguers. Remember the story of a guy in the synagogue who was demonized? He's in the synagogue. It's like saying someone in the church is demonized. So they're trying everything. They come out, Satan went out and, a huge push to take down the Messiah, but it was too late. Fortune tellers. Remember that story in Acts 16, the little girl? She's a fortune teller. She's being demonized. But it's interesting. She's not out of her mind. They're using her for cash, remember? That's Acts 16. And then you got the interesting story of Legion, which we'll read on. Can we go to Luke 11, please? Legion is a very interesting account. It appears in all the synoptics. Matthew 8, Mark 5, Luke 8. I want to look at the account in Luke 11, though. Legion is an insanely violent demon. He's demonizing the host. He becomes very insanely violent. I think it's the same demon that another story tells, where this one demon is demonizing one person, and the guy beats up 3 people or something, and they run away naked and all bloody. That was one person against a group, basically. Whoever has Luke 11, 14 to 26, please. Luke 11.
I'm reading here. And he was casting out a demon, and it was dumb. And it came about that when the demon had gone out, the dumb man spoke, and the multitude marveled. But some of them said, he cast out demons by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And others, to test him, were demanding him a sign from heaven. But he knew their thoughts and said to them, any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a house divided against itself falls. And if Satan also is divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? For you say that I cast out demons by Beelzebub. And if I by Beelzebub cast out demons, by whom do your sons cast out? Consequently, they shall be your judges. But if I cast out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When the strong man, fully armed, guards his own house stead, his possessions are undisturbed. But when someone stronger than he attacks him and overpowers him, he takes away from him all his armor on which he has relied and distributes his plunder. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather me scatters. When the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest and not finding any. It says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it swept and put in order. Then he goes and takes along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they go and live there, and the last fate of that man becomes worse than the first. And it came about while he said these things that one of the women in the crowd raised her voice and said to him, blessed is the womb that bore you, and the breast at which you nursed. But he says, on the contrary, blessed are those who hear the word of God and observe it.
Thanks, Bob. This incident is chock full of extra biblical echoes. So Jesus lived in a world, he didn't live in a vacuum. He lived in a world full of this type of stories. Now, before we wrap, I want to go through some of the accounts of the early evidence, because it gives you a good context of especially this story, especially when he goes on to talk about this strong man, right, with his house and his possessions, but someone else attacks him. Okay, so in your notes there, so you got the Enoch reference there. This is to do with the giants, the Genesis 6. You got some Qumran quotes there if you see them. Now, Kate, could you go to the one in the quote of Philo? This is Philo the philosopher, BC times, on a book called On Giants. Philo, please.
When the angels of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, they took unto themselves wives of all of them whom they chose. Those beings whom other philosophers call demons, Moses usually calls angels, and they are souls hovering in the air. And these beings are invisible to us, and some have descended into bodies, as into a river. Some are carried away and swallowed up by the ferocity of a most violent whirlpool. Others resist with all their power. At first, swim on the top of it, and afterwards fly back to the place from which they started.
Barbara, Jubilees 10, please. BC document, Jubilees 10.
Demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah and destroy them. And the sons of Noah came to Noah, and they told him concerning the demons which were leading astray, blinding and killing their children. Noah prayed before the Lord his God, and said, You know how the watchers, the fathers of these spirits, acted in my day. And as for these spirits which are living, imprison them and hold them fast in the place of condemnation. And angels explained to Noah all the medicines of their diseases, together with their seductions, how he might heal them with herbs of the earth. And Noah wrote down all things in a book has instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Then the evil spirits were precluded from hurting the sons of Noah.
Michelle, Testament of Solomon. Now, this is a first century.
Read past that, not talk.
Well, I just want to get through the quotes here.
Sorry, it's a lot of crazy stuff.
Testament of Solomon. This is an interesting source because it's actually First Apostolic Age, as early as. Thank you.
You, Solomon, are the son of a man, but although I was born of a human mother, I am the son of an angel. You have us to torture for a little while, then we shall disperse among human beings. Cause the wickedness of men to spread throughout the world. I cause madness. I'm a serial killer. And there came a spirit of shadowy human form, having glowing eyes. And I asked him, saying, Who are you? He said, I am a lecherous spirit of a giant human who died in the slaughter in the time of the giants. My dwelling is in desolate places. My activity is this. I sit near dead men in the tombs, and at midnight I assume the form of the dead, and if I see someone, immediately I kill him with the sword. And if I'm not able to kill him, I make him demonized, so they chew their flesh.
Anthony, sorry, Betty Jean has in. Sorry, Betty Jean, I missed the next one there, please. Athenagoras. Athenagoras, thank you.
Some angels fell into impure love of virgins and were subjected by their flesh. Of these were begotten those who we call giants, and the souls of the giants which are the demons who wandered about the world performed actions similar to the fallen angels. They haunt the air and the earth and are no longer able to raise to heavenly things.
So then you got famous names, Justin Martyr, Tertullian, or Origen even, talking about basically the point here being that BC, First Apostolic Age, and after Apostolic Age are almost unanimous, I would say, that they're connecting these activities that Jesus encountered 3-4 times to, they're going back and saying, you know what, these were those giants when they died, let's call it, when their bodies were destroyed, they still survived in this spiritual now state. Just one last one from Lactantius. Anthony, go back down to the Lactantius, AD 304, please.
But they who were born from these, because they were neither angels nor men, but bearing a kind of mixed nature, were not admitted into hell, as their fathers were not into heaven. Thus there came to be two kinds of demons, one of heaven, the other of the earth. These contaminated and abandoned spirits, as I say, wander over the whole earth and contrive a solace for their own perdition by the destruction of men. Therefore they fill every place with snares, deceits, frauds, and errors, for they cling to individuals, and these spirits are without substance and not to be grasped, insinuate themselves into the bodies of men, and secretly working in their inward parts, they corrupt the health, hasten diseases, terrify their souls with dreams, harass their minds with frenzies. This is a Christian writer, by the way.
Right.
Very strong pre-mill kingdom person.
Right, they're all, well, quote-unquote Christian writers. Tertullian, yeah. So BC writers, First Apostolic Age, and after Christian writers, quote-unquote, have this information. Scholars obviously say that, so the giants, the tradition of the giants, and this tradition of disembodied demons, let's call them for now disembodied demons, are obviously, if not cited in the gospel accounts when it comes to demons, this understanding is in the Gospels. Now before, I know there are some comments or questions, but let's go to Mark 5, So we saw, remember, we're hearing things like these demons are near tombs, near graveyards. Remember there was an encounter with Jesus, with the guy near the tombs, and so on. Mark 5, if anyone can start reading there.
Carlos, is this page available to the people online?
Yes.
Is it,
Yeah.
where is it?
Yeah, the page, the notes are
I'll put the link again.
on our blog spot. I'll send them to you.
I'll just tell them, because the people are dropping off like flies.
Oh,
we
no.
only have 7
Right.
people on.
Yeah, sorry about the
Some of them are
connection.
still chatting. I just want to let them know what we're reading. And they can't even hear a lot of it.
Okay,
So I want to let them know
sorry.
to look up some of this.
Yep. Mark 5. Who's got Mark 5? Going once?
They came to the other side of the
Okay.
sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gashing himself with stones. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he began to implore him earnestly not to send him out of the country, not to send them out of the country. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea.
So again, if we go back to all those references by extra-biblical writers to Qumran, from Qumran, which is at least 300 BC, Jubilees, and so on, these things descend into bodies, they influence them in such a way, they hang around arid, weird places like graveyards. There's an account right there. They are without bodies. The New Testament, I think, is clear that demons do not have bodies. They're not corporeal. They're not physical. They need a body. They need what I call a host. Every demonic account in the New Testament, they required a host. This is a classic example where they even begged Jesus to send them to the pigs. The Luke 11 one is interesting because when they don't have a host, what do? It says they go around arid places, waterless places. By the way, in Jewish understanding, demons, their kryptonite, as it were, if there's any comic book fans, their weakness was water. So they go through desert-like places because they don't like waters. There's an interesting account by Josephus of an exorcist, quote-unquote, Eliezer, who used water to weaken or drive out a demonic spirit. They're without substance, says our last Christian writer, Lactantius. They work in the inner parts. Maybe your ear, you go deaf. Your eyesight, your tongue, you go mute, right? There are mute people in the Gospels, etc. These are just stringing the pearls. I'm just stringing the pearls. I'm just giving you the evidence. The reason why I may not sound, if I don't sound dogmatic on this, is because I do share the concern by some of my biblical Unitarian brethren that I was very reluctant, you can ask my wife, to define demons as disembodied spirits because we don't believe in immortal soul, first of all. We always have, or I have this saying that a person is only a person, you're nobody without a body, right? and so on. Now that's true for human beings. I'm still very dogmatic about that. The evidence is clear about human beings. But with these things, let's call them, I have to go with the evidence, especially obviously the gospel tradition, and you throw all. I mean, I have tons of more stuff I could show you, but I hope this at least gives you food for thought that we're dealing with, as Bob was saying, not flesh and blood as such, but the principalities, the systems, and they're not just underground. They're here, and they're in the heavens. Think about that. This whole deal is from underground, from bottom to top. It's replete with this. So there's a lot of demonic stuff going on.
You know, talking about the demons, you know, the water seems to be their enemy, I guess, it's their kryptonite.
Weakness, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You know, Christ used the phrase living water. You could ask of me, I would give you this living water. And I'm thinking maybe just the spiritual side of it, that water conquers these beings or whatever they are. I mean, spiritually speaking, I mean, it just reminded me of that when you were saying that.
Also, maybe that's why God decided to have a flood.
Yeah.
Because if these
Thanks
creatures
for
can't
bringing
survive
that up.
water,
It's very exact.
then that's the way, rather than just burning down all the cities where they live or something.
That-
Decided to.
Thanks for bringing us back to the last time and the origin of this Genesis 6, the flood. Why the flood? By the way, the idea that the flood was localized, it doesn't make sense to me anyway. I don't know about you. Can you just tell us briefly why it localized? You said it best.
Well, they had this at the Ark in Kentucky.
Oh, they did?
Ark Encounter. They said, if the flood was just going to be local, why did Noah have to bother to build this huge ark? God would have told him to move, somewhere. And you didn't need to have birds on the ark if the flood was local, because the birds could have flown off to where they could find land. Yeah.
So for those and many other reasons, there are, by the way, stories of floods worldwide. Worldwide, from the Americas to China. You got ancient writings, ancient pictures of a flood.
Well, they found all type of fossils and stuff like on the mountains.
Right.
Yeah, where there should be no water. I mean, like the mountain 2 miles high. Something ridiculous.
But a flood has been reduced to a story about Noah and the ark.
Yeah.
And as was said, stories are just that. Stories.
For
They're
children.
they're not really to be believed.
It's like David the Giant, same thing.
I mean, if you went out and asked in the churches, what do you understand by the fall?
Yeah.
I think they would say the season when the leaves fall off the trees.
Well, more than that, what do you understand by Genesis 6?
Yes,
What?
exactly. And we didn't get to this wonderful opening sentence where if you asked a Jew, why is the world the way it is? Why do we get depravity and so on? Why is humanity so messed up? You'd get Genesis 3 and 6.
Yes.
You're not going to get that in our evangelical
No.
world.
And Babel, that's what I said at the that's Dr. Michael Heiser.
Yes.
And speaking of Genesis 6, because we only have one comment online.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's from Randy. He said it's interesting that in Genesis 6:5, Yahweh does not mention anything about angels corrupting mankind, but only mentions the wickedness of man.
Yes.
And then in Genesis 3:14 and 15, Yahweh does speak to the serpent, a corrupting angel, directly, just an observation.
Just on that, one of the things that quote, the Heiser quote, one of the things Dr. Heiser says that the Old Testament never references the fall, Genesis 3, as an explanation for the condition of the human heart or the condition of human wickedness. That's Dr. Heiser's view. But I think he may have something there, because remember Genesis 6, after the event,
Well, I mean, Cain was able to.
right, but the point is about the an explanation as such. Yes, we know the action, but he's talking about the explanation of. Okay. If you note the account of Genesis 6, what goes on to happen as an explanation? So the after effect of this evil angelic influence, what goes on to happen? It says that, verse 6, God regretted having made us, right? He changed his mind. And the heart of man was, where is it? Where am I looking at, Sarah?
Verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil.
Right. I think Randy said the opposite to that. Randy, I don't know if he said the opposite, but this comes on the heels of the corruption by the evil angels. The heart of man. So this is an explanation of, yes, we are fallen and things, but it becomes worse. It coarsens, right, the situation. It makes it hard. Now, just to wrap up quickly.
I think Randy's point was that it just says the wickedness of man.
Yeah, doesn't mention the angels having anything to do with it.
But it comes on the heels.
Right.
Of
so
the
this
corrupt.
event caused man
Well,
to be
if
so evil.
If we're reading this
Yeah.
as we should, like anything we read chronologically, this is it to me, and to me, Randy, we might disagree, but this was a result of that. The heart of man became wicked all the time, 24/7, and God said, "You know what? I changed my mind." As a result of this event, I think it's obviously putting off it.
Really, man wasn't even really man anymore. Man was turning into something that was not what God created.
That too, sections of humanity were being subverted, subhumanized, if you will. Just quickly, so someone might be asking, and I asked myself this question a couple of nights ago after getting my head out of all the Jewish stuff, books. Where's the evidence then? If these things existed, Enoch says they were 400 feet tall, by the way. I think that's an exaggeration. The Bible gives us maybe the tallest was 20 feet. No, 20 feet. Is that from here, Sarah, to the ceiling? Maybe 20 feet? Okay? Where is the archaeological evidence? This wasn't also like a couple or a dozen. These were nations of giants. Have you ever thought? So where's the evidence, Carlos? You could rightly ask me that. I asked myself that. Guess what I found? If you go to the website of the American Museum of Natural History, no less. Yeah, this isn't some flyby thing. The American Museum of Natural History. They got an article on Greek giants, and this is what it says. I don't know if you can get the link there, Sarah. Indeed, even today, to this day, now you believe this or not, you can go check it. To this day, a large and surprisingly human-like bones can be found in Greece. Modern scientists understand such bones to be the remains of mammoths, dinosaurs, that once lived in the region. But ancient Greeks were largely unfamiliar with these massive animals, and many believed that the enormous bones they found were the remains of human-like giants. Any non-human traits in the bones, so once they examined these things, were thought to be due to the grotesque anatomical features of giants. Isn't that an interesting statement? I mean, that's the American Museum of Natural History. Just to close up, Anthony, can you close up with the Unger quote at the bottom of the notes there, please? Biblical demonology.
Demonology, then, as it exists in the elemental.
Is that it?
That one?
Yeah, go ahead.
As it exists in its elemental thought. Elemental, though essential form in the early chapters of Genesis is the ultimate source and basis of all demonology, ethnic, later biblical, Jewish and Christian. Genesis, as the book of beginnings, catalogues the beginning of the earth, human race. the beginning of human sin and death, and the beginning of human government and language. It also suggests the origin of demons, but inasmuch as demons are certainly to be traced back to the fall of Satan and the angels, which the book of Genesis assumes as background material, in the same way it assumes the existence of God as background material, Genesis 1. It cannot validly be charged that there are no demons in the opening book of the Bible, in any event, or upon any possible inference based on revealed facts. They are there, whether as fallen angels or as disembodied spirits of a pre-Adamite race.
That's the human view.
Yeah, I don't think we need a pre-Adamite race.
Right. Or
as a result of the cohabitation, yes, of angelic beings with antediluvian women. In the book of Genesis, the author assumes the existence of demons, of course, just as plainly as he assumes the existence of God or the fall of Satan and his angels.
Right, I think this is a good summary. So yes, it gives you both views, the so-called pre-Adamite, but the cohab. One thing I just want to make clear. So remember, good angels, bad angels. There are different classes of good angels, different classes of bad angels. Just as there are disembodied demons, there are demons. There are fallen angels that pre-existed, if you will, the Genesis 6 event. So again, I want to make this clear that there's Satan and his angels, Revelation 12, I believe, 9 and 12. Satan has his angels. That happened long ago, before the Genesis 6 event. But Genesis 6 produced more, if you will, demons. So the creation was already with a satanic presence, with demons and their guide, their Lord, Satan. But then you had a greater proliferation, if you will, of demons. So that goes without saying. I don't think I mentioned that. So bottom line, folks, let's stay alert. Let's be sober-minded, right? Ephesians 2 and Ephesians 6. This is just a paraphrase here. To you Gentiles also, who were dead through your offenses and sins, which were once habitual to you while you walked in the ways of this world and obeyed the prince of the powers of the air, the spirits that are now at work in the hearts of the sons of disobedience, the demonized, not possessed. To you God has given life, because your fight is not with flesh and blood, but with principalities, rulers, the powers of this dark world, and it is dark, folks, from underground, bottom to top. This thing is dark. And with evil spirits, which are under heaven, if not on earth and in the heavens itself. So, various books there. I highly recommend from all that list there. So we read some of them in your notes, but I highly recommend Dr. Is it Judd Burton, B-U-R-T-O-N, Interview with the Giant. You can get that for a couple of dollars on PDF, electronically online, if you don't have issues reading. It's not a long book, it's only 100 or so. But Dr. Burton and Dr. Heiser are really the notable degreed people doing this work, and I think they're doing it excellently. Again, they're evangelicals. I don't agree with evangelicals. I am a non-Trinitarian. Disclaimer. Also, I would recommend the book Unger, which is finished with Biblical Demonology. Some of the books there you can actually read large sections of for free on Google Books. So you don't. I had to buy a couple of these, but so those two: Interview with the Giant. I love that title, and Biblical Demonology. This subject is ancient. This thing about, so we read in 1 Peter 3, the famous passage where Jesus is made alive in the Spirit and he goes down to preach, it says to spirits in prison. Now, that's a very influential passage in church history. If you look at the Apostles' Creed, one of the oldest creeds known, late 2nd century, so maybe 180 AD, very early. So the creed, you know, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and so on. It's a very good creed. I can agree to that creed. And then it goes on to, he was born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pilate, crucified, died, buried. He descended to the dead, it says. And on the third day he rose again. So it's in this very early creed, this story of Jesus going down and preaching to what they thought was the dead at that time. So it goes way back, so we'll try and delve into who exactly were these spirits in prison, or were they really dead people? But first, let's go back in history to an event that was almost proved to be a pandemic style event, a cataclysmic event that almost did away with God's creation as a whole. So this is a very important event that we should study. Okay, so we'll start with Matt, and if we go around the room, we'll do Genesis 6, and we'll do the first 8 verses there.
Okay. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them,
That the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose.
Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, they will live no more than 120 years.
The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown.
Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
so the Lord said, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on earth, and he was grieved in his heart.
And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I've made them.
Verse 8, last
But
one.
Noah found favor with the Lord.
Now it's a very interesting story, because there is sin in the world already, right? According to the fall in Genesis 2 and 3. There is sin, there is death, but this event, let's call it, makes it worse. Makes it so much worse that God eventually says, you know what? I'm going to wipe them all out. But then luckily for us, there's this guy called Noah. So first, so it talks about the daughters of men. So these are women, human beings, right? And then the figures here called the sons of God, verses 2 and 4. And they produce, with the human beings, with the women, this creatures called the Nephilim. And it also says that this happened later, sometime later. Now we don't know. The biblical account doesn't give us another Genesis 6 event. And then after the sons of God had sex with these women, this happened. And these Nephilim are the heroes of old. So I don't know, Hercules, Zeus, were they really, maybe there's something to it? Titans. Actually, I'll talk about the Titans. Now I'll focus a little bit on the sons of God, who they are. So there's this debate. There's always a debate in our faith. So what I'm going to present is a very biased view, which, because I agree with, I'll cite Michael Heiser. You can check him out. Again, he's a Trinitarian. I am not a Trinitarian. I am going to quote certain evangelicals in my presentation. I do not fully endorse everything they say and do, obviously, But we're not a cult. We read stuff. Like the New Testament writers, they read pagan writers. They even quote some pagan writers, by the way. So that they read stuff. So you should too. You should read. Don't be scared. If you think you got the truth has nothing to fear. Sons of God are also called the Watchers. And these Watchers come from a book called the Book of the Watchers, but it's more popularly known as the first book of Enoch. Now, Enoch obviously didn't write these books. I think Dr. Heiser says there are at least 3 books attributed to Enoch. Now, they just give them that name. It doesn't mean Enoch wrote them. But yeah, it's called the Book of the Watchers. Now, this book is very influential in church history. It influenced the Old Testament, as we'll see, and it influenced the New Testament as well, because actually the New Testament writers, Peter and Jude, cite specifically Enoch. I think they name them. Jude names Enoch, I believe. And the provenance, the origin is at least 300 years before Christ, before the apostolic age, Enoch. This book is circulating, all these books. So this is a very well-known story in Jewish circles. But in Enoch, the sons of God are called Watchers, and it's actually also used in the Old Testament, this name. It's in Daniel 4. And I'll just give you the verses. Daniel 4, verse 13, 17, and 23. In the Greek version of Daniel, there's a Greek Old Testament version known as the Septuagint, or the 70 LXX. They're actually, the word there is actually translated as watchers. Now, it looks like they're a category of angels. So we're going to read a passage here from the first book of Enoch.
And when the sons of men had multiplied, in those days beautiful and comely daughters were born to them. And the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughters of men, and let us beget for ourselves children. The giants, or Nephilim, who are produced from the cohabitation of spirits in prison, 1 Peter 3:19, and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. And on the earth shall be their dwelling. Because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers, angels, Daniel 4:13, 17, and 23, Septuagint, is their beginning and primal origin.
Now that sounds almost verbatim, right?
Yeah.
With Genesis 6. The sons of heaven appears as the sons of, morning stars. In the book of Psalms, morning stars and sons of heavens it's a parallelism, a Hebraic parallelism. So the point being that this is very germane to Judaism at the time, this accounts. And as you can see there, this is almost like reading what we just read in Genesis. Just to focus, they're giants, they're called giants, gigantes, in Greek, and we'll see in the book of Numbers, in Deuteronomy, and in the book of Joshua, all over the place, you'll see how these survive the flood or are later eruptions of what Genesis says they were on the land, and then later they were on the land, but they're called giants. So that's the Nephilim. The Nephilim become giants. It's synonymous. You got to remember that so we don't get confused here. The cohabitation of spirits. Now that's a reference obviously to 1 Peter 3, and we'll go through that in a second. And they're evil spirits, i.e. demons, we could say. And then you have the holy watchers there connecting to Daniel. Now before we proceed, I'll deal with the canon question. So, is Carlos saying that Enoch should be canonized? You know, that we always get into this. No, of course not. The canon is the canon as we have it. Unless you think other books, other so-called extra-biblical books or apocalyptic works should be canonized as well, just because they're alluded to in certain scriptures. Did you know, I didn't know this, but there are 30 plus extra Jewish works cited by the Old Testament. 30 plus. And there's at least 3 pagan writers cited by the New Testament writers. So, unless you think, well,
The Bible would be this thick.
right, let's, yeah, Michelle's going like this. We got, like, well, not with the computer. But, okay, so no, I personally don't believe that it should be canonized. But if these people read Enoch in this case,
Yes.
why can't we? Right? To learn, to get the context, to get the background of what we're talking about. So yeah, that's hopefully my simple reply to that. All right, so sons of God. Let's look at sons of God. First of all, that phrase, B'nai Elohim, I got a resident Hebrew Greek scholar here. We're very fortunate. He'll correct my Hebrew and Greek. B'nai Elohim appears in Job, in the book of Job, at least, 3 times. In Psalms twice, at least. And then we'll look at an extra one. And it never means human beings. It's never applied to human beings. It's usually translated in the Greek version as angelos, angels. So that's one thing that would tell me that these are obviously not humans. Now, the humans' view, the alternative view that I do not agree with, is that the sons of God were sons of Seth, who cohabited with the daughters of Cain. So why did Cain just have daughters? I don't know. But obviously the text, the Genesis text, distinguishes, and the Enoch text, if we take that as support, not as scripture, but as support, the text distinguishes that the sons of God are different from human beings, that is, daughters of men. Another view is that they're sons of powerful demon-possessed tyrants or kings of the time, who even dared to call or think they were gods. But again, the phrase B'nai Elohim and other things we'll look at, to me, cancel that out. I want to put aside the thing that always comes up. One of the arguments against the view that these were simply angels, bad angels, obviously, is Mark 12:25. So Mark 12:25, Jesus says, at the resurrection, we will be like the angels, who neither marry nor take partners. In other words, have sex. Okay? So people go, wait a minute, Carlos, so how can those be angels, sons of God? Well, we're obviously talking about a rebellion that took place, a disobedient act that took place. Angels, we will see, left their dominion and did something they should not have done. Actually, the book of Enoch goes on to tell this grandiose story. It even names the leaders of the 200, at least, angels or watchers, this class of angels, who left their habitation or dominion, and it even names them, I think one of the main culprits is Azazel. And, excuse me?
Sanjaza is another one.
Yep. So, yeah, they're obviously bad angels who go on to create demons in the Nephilim, or the giants. So I think that's easily solved. Satan, if we believe in a Satan, that Satan is an individual, I know some might not believe that, but Satan, we believe, is a fallen angel, right? He was the highest of the angels. So if Satan fell, well, it goes to show that others can as well. Mm-hmm. And actually, there are a couple of interesting verses in Job where one of Job's friends, I forgot the name, these names are so hard, says to Job, God doesn't even trust his own angels. Mm-hmm. So twice that appears in Job, I forgot the verses. Mm-hmm. But there might be some truth to that. I mean, if they're doing that sort of stuff, they know good from evil, right? In Genesis, God says, God's talking to someone and says, they will know good and evil. They will be like us, right? Remember that? So why, pray tell, Carlos, would angels leave their glorious, heavenly cohabitation, be with God, and why would they throw it all away? Well, the same reason we do, humans. The same reason creatures who know good and bad throw it away. Because, first of all, there's pride in this story, right? They want to cohabit. They want to create their own descendants. They want to be, guess what? Creators, like God, maybe. So there's a bit of pride, maybe, there. There's lust, obviously, at the forefront, right? They see these beautiful women, and they want to go after what Peter will say. We'll look at Peter. Alien or different flesh. Heteras sarkos. Or heterosarkos, I think. Anyway, and there's also an added thing that I want to talk about, time permitting, called what I call Bullinger's belief. Why are they doing this? Well, Bullinger set out an interesting belief about this. And again, I do not agree with Bullinger's dispensationalism. I am not a dispensationalist, etc. But again, we're not a cult. We can read other people and agree